What's that?
I said, who is Father Ventura?
Meanwhile,
I have exorcised the demons.
Thanks to my mates at Bethesda ANZ, I got an early hands-on preview with the upcoming release of Machine Games' Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, a video game that a fair few fans have asked, how are the developers of the recent Wolfenstein games going to make a Indiana Jones game? And I found myself asking the same question too, and thanks to Bethesda ANZ, I have my answer.
God, give me the answer!
Now, myself and my mate Norza had about 2 hours or so in a session with different sections of the story. Now, we started off near the start, where we played as Dr. Jones at Marshall College. Setting the scene of the story was someone stealing an artifact from the college, giving us a bit of a vibe of what we're in for, say, gameplay-wise. Now, from this, we continued for say 20 to 30 minutes or so, moving to the Vatican, or the City of the Vatican. Now, during this opening portion that we had, I got to experience some opening puzzles at the college, where you need to figure out what has been stolen by examining items that have been left behind. Sort of like when you examine items in LA Noire by picking them up and looking at their clues, and you sort of need to figure out what's been missed or what's missing from the cabinets in this style of puzzle before we follow the clues as to where this thief escaped. Now, after this, we set out on our journey as Dr. Jones, as sort of turning into Indiana Jones, if you will, on the adventure that is the story that the Great Circle starts. Now, after the college, we got to arrive at the opening portion of the Vatican City that is under the occupation of the Nazis, and that is where the real gameplay starts to open up. But the overall gameplay and vibe is a mixture of a few games. Now, my mate Norza mentioned that Indiana Jones and the Great Circle has a bit of a vibe similar to that of the Dishonored series, but seeing as I've not overly checked them out and they aren't really my kinds of vibes for games, like that's a story for another time.
I'm sorry, could you speak into my good ear?
But I would say the gameplay, atmosphere, and the main vibe that I had for this was Alien Isolation meets LA Noire a little bit.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
Now, what I mean by this is, and just stick with me for a moment, is Alien Isolation had you play as Amanda Ripley, where you saw and did everything through her eyes, and you physically have to do the actions. If you had to open a door with a blowtorch, you actually had to move the blowtorch around. If you had those giant locks with the bolt cutters, you actually had to break the lock and open the door with the bolt cutters, and you have to do the same thing here in Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. When you get a key for a door, you need to press a button to push open the door. You need to press another button to turn the key or to light your torch, and all these moments of gameplay and atmosphere reminded me that we are playing as Indiana Jones, not what we think or what we want Indiana Jones to do. When you run and your stamina gets low, you can hear Indiana breathing heavily, trying to sort of catch his breath. When you're crawling through tunnels, you can hear him wince and make noises, and one of my favourite things, at least in any first-person sort of game, and I check it with every game I play, is if you look down, you can see his clothes, you can see his feet, and you can see him move around in his jacket, and everything sort of moves, like the clothing isn't stuck to the character model. When you're sort of wearing a jacket, you can actually see sort of the sleeve of the jacket move around. You are feeling like you're actually in the footsteps or playing as Indiana Jones. But getting back to the gameplay, the section of the Vatican that we played through, it sort of opened up into there are a few ways to sort of get around and tackle a mission, like going from point A to point B. But sort of some examples are, you can go loud if you want to, and you can use Indiana's pistol, but it's a pistol. It will draw attention to guards in the area. So I sort of personally treated it a bit like how you would say play a Far Cry game quietly, but instead of using a bow and arrow and doing my best Rambo impression, Indiana can actually pick up and use nearby items to knock out enemies like wine bottles, broom handles, and tools like hammers to quickly and quietly knock out enemies when they aren't expecting it, or you can actually throw items and distract them and just sneak around them. But after we went sort of through the area of the Vatican, we sort of had a bit of a break, and then the devs loaded up a separate, different portion of the story where we go to the Great Pyramids of Giza, where the game actually went from a somewhat linear path, if you will, at the Vatican, and then opened up into sort of a sandbox area with multiple ways to progress and play in the story. Now, Giza had Nazi dig sites, a bit like what we got in sort of Raiders of the Lost Ark, and it had markets and shops where we could buy key items that would help us with puzzles or exploration, but it also pulls a page out of the Hitman book where we can disguise Indiana in outfits to blend into environments and sneak our way into areas that we shouldn't overly be in. But, just like in the Hitman series, there are officers and NPCs that can see through your disguise if you get too close as well, so you do kind of need to be careful, but it's kind of cool that we get to do that as Indiana. But as Giza, though, is a open sandbox, naturally, there are loads of different side objectives to do, some of which are exploring small lost temples that, well, act as tombs from the Tomb Raider series, in which that you'll have brain teasers and puzzles that if you complete them, you'll get rewards such as treasure and so on and so forth, but you can also get money, and money can be used to purchase items in the marketplace, as well as you get experience points that you can use to purchase upgrades for Indiana. And the upgrade system here, and sort of tying it back into LA Noire, if you will, all goes back into Indiana's journal that he uses. And it works pretty damn well as the tool in the game as well. Obviously too, items like information and mission objectives go into the journal, but it's also used to look at your map. Now, the game doesn't have a standard map on the HUD, but instead you'll look at your journal to look at the map. And if you don't want to keep pausing the game to look at your journal, and also as well, the game doesn't pause when you go into your journal, but you can sort of have it open in front of you and walk around, like helping guide you around, and I thought that was really, really cool. But it's sort of like all vibes and moves in together. Like, as I mentioned, you are playing as Indiana Jones, and it has a bit of that Alien Isolation atmosphere and feel to it, at least I thought so. But Indiana can also find upgrades out and about in the world in books. Books that will teach Indiana new perks and abilities, and he keeps these books inside his satchel, and he can sort of look and go through them and sort of purchase new perks in the journal system. But you'll have increased health, or, quicker moving while crouched, and Indiana has a stamina system as well that works a little bit similar to, say, sort of that grip system or whatnot in Metal Gear Solid 2, I think it was, where if you ran out of stamina while sort of climbing or gripping onto a wall, Solid Snake would fall. And it's the same sort of thing here. If you use Indiana Jones's whip to sort of slash around an item to swing across something or to climb up a wall, Indiana can actually run out of stamina and just fall. But one of my personal favourite perks that you can get is called Indiana's Lucky Hat, where if you lose a fight, and you might, but if you lose a fight, Indiana will go into a down but not out state where he'll actually crawl on the ground, and if you make your way to his hat, you'll have this sort of quick kind of cutscene where he puts the hat back on his head and dusts it off, and you get sort of that sort of second wind vibe to it. But where I think the gameplay shines was in its puzzles and tombs. Now, as Indiana can use items like hammers and such like that, you can use that to actually break open walls to get inside hidden rooms, and there are environmental puzzles similar to the Staff of Ra scene from the Raiders of the Lost Ark. But there's also moments where you'll be able to sneak and hide in tombs that are currently actually being excavated by Nazis, and it kind of felt like that moment or scene in The Mummy Returns, and it all kind of sort of feels and wraps back around to the general atmosphere and vibe of the game. However, I think the biggest learning curve for a lot of us, though, will be sort of how the game works, because it isn't a shooter. And yes, it's first person, it does go into third person when you're doing some cool platforming moments here and there, but it is developed by the Wolfenstein team. And there are guns like Indiana's pistol, and you can pick up weapons like rifles and machine guns from enemies when you knock them out. But when you do this, you won't just have like 2 magazines of ammo you can use. Weapons like the submachine gun act a little bit like the weapons in, say, Star Wars Outlaws, in that you can pick them up and use them until the magazine runs dry. But instead of dropping it, you can actually use, say, the submachine gun, for example, as a club to beat up enemies with them, which I thought was actually kind of cool. But honestly, I had about 2 hours with Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, and I just wanted more. I wanted to explore other ways to sneak into a Nazi base. I wanted to explore more tombs and wave my torch at scorpions to get them away from me. I wanted to use my whip to remove guns from enemies' hands, and yeah, it is as cool as it sounds. Now, I did ask on my Twitter though if anyone had any questions, and I just thought I'd quickly go through some of them. Now, my mate Josh asks, does Indy make to some countries we haven't seen in previous games and movies? And in my hands-on session, we got to explore Marshall College, which was pretty cool, the Pyramids of Giza, and the Vatican City, and it looks like we're going to have more when the game comes out as well.
That's good.
Another buddy of mine, Footlong Players, asked, how does the game balance puzzles and action? Does it really make you feel like a genius Playboy school teacher archaeologist? Now, as the playthrough wasn't a linear progression and we did jump ahead in the story when moving from the Vatican to Giza, it's hard to comment on, say, the balancing, but the Giza gameplay flowed pretty damn well between action, stealth, and puzzling. If you got caught in a stealth moment during these sort of sandbox areas, you could just run and hide behind boxes and wait for things to calm down, and it kind of felt like it was right out of the films. Like the vibes that I keep saying vibes, but the vibes were actually really sort of pulled right off the screen. The puzzling was great to the point where I just wanted to explore more and find more tombs and artifacts, and there were some pretty cool brain teasers when you've got them figured out as well. And once you sort of you unlock a door, you break through a wall, Nazi patrols can just come in and throw a spanner right into the works. And as the game, again, has that Alien Isolation vibe where everything you do, even something small as turning a key, has you actually interacting on your controller or keyboard, physically pushing a button to turn a key, I think it's pretty damn cool. It's also worth noting, as you might not be aware, Indiana Jones isn't a brick shithouse like sort of, Arnold Schwarzenegger in an action film. 2 Nazi guards with guns can actually put you down pretty quick if you don't play your sort of smarts around it, really. Now, Liam asks, I'm interested to hear how the combat and stealth mechanics are in the game, especially compared to Machine Games' previous games. I sort of hope I already answered this one throughout the video, my dude, but compared to, say, Wolfenstein, for example, you won't overly be going in loud and shooting everything in your way, like you would in Wolfenstein. The gunplay is a bit more simpler, but it is satisfying when you see a larger enemy taunt you wanting to face off in fisticuffs, and you just flat shoot them. Now, I think there's a few fans who can agree that every movie after Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade has been unexpected, to say the least. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle feels like and looks like a story that would have made a great movie in the film lineup, at least from the 2-hour session I had with it, and I cannot wait for this to actually release. But whether you too have a fear of snakes, or like me, you think the Temple of Doom is the best film in the original trilogy, always remember to play with each other and play with yourself.